I thought nothing could hurt worse than being publicly humiliated by the person I loved most on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But I was wrong. It was my birthday, and everything in my small apartment had been carefully arranged by my own hands. The warm glow of fairy lights, my favorite playlist softly in the background, the cake I'd spent hours decorating, each detail thoughtfully chosen for this special night. Tonight, I planned to announce the happiest news of my life, to share the joy bubbling within me, unaware it would soon be shattered. Just as I took a deep breath, ready to share my announcement, Justin stepped forward, a beautifully wrapped box gleaming in his hands. His eyes sparkled strangely, a flicker I couldn't quite read. "For someone truly special," he said, his voice oddly playful yet distant. I unwrapped the box carefully, my heart racing with anticipation, our friends' curious gazes focused entirely on me. Inside wasn't a gift, but a neatly folded note. Confused, I unfolded it, and as my eyes skimmed the words, I felt as though I'd been plunged into freezing water. "I'm leaving you. You're useless, and I deserve better." An awkward laugh rippled through the room, friends nervously assuming it was some poorly timed joke. But Justin's cold stare and mocking smile made it painfully clear. He was deadly serious. My heartbeat pounded violently in my ears as embarrassment and disbelief surged through me. In that agonizing moment, pieces of memories I'd conveniently ignored suddenly snapped sharply into focus. The subtle signs I'd overlooked. His late-night texting, the distant look in his eyes when we spoke about our future, and his dismissive attitude whenever I attempted intimacy. These were red flags I'd rationalized away, believing if I loved harder, sacrificed more, he'd return to me. Now, as humiliation burned my cheeks and tears blurred my vision, I stood frozen, gripping that cruel note as if holding tighter could somehow erase its harsh reality. Justin calmly turned his back, strolling toward the door, leaving me to endure the suffocating silence of a room full of people unsure whether to comfort me or look away. As the front door closed softly behind him, I realized this night wasn't just about losing the man I loved. It was the moment I had lost sight of myself. But even in this unbearable pain, something small and fierce ignited deep within me. A quiet resolve, the first step toward reclaiming the self-respect I'd long forgotten. After everyone had left, the apartment settled into an unsettling silence. The faint echoes of laughter and whispers still lingered in my ears, blending into a dull ache deep inside my chest. Barbara sat quietly beside me, not rushing me, not trying to fill the silence. She knew exactly what I needed in moments like this: space to breathe, space to feel. My eyes landed on the note again. "I'm leaving you. You're useless, and I deserve better." Those words, so blunt and cold, echoed in my mind, painfully familiar. Suddenly, a flood of memories swept through me, vivid and inescapable. I remembered my mother's voice clearly, harsh and detached during my teenage years. "Maybe if you tried harder, you'd be worthy of our pride. Why can't you be more like your sister?" All my life, love felt like something I had to chase, had to earn. It was never given freely, always conditional, always dependent on my compliance, my silence, my sacrifices. I carried these invisible scars into every relationship, never noticing how much damage they'd done, until tonight. "I don't know why I keep letting people do this to me," I finally confessed, voice trembling. "It feels like I'm still that little girl, desperate for approval, accepting crumbs instead of respect." Barbara gently placed her hand over mine. "It stops here," she said firmly. Her voice was calm but filled with fierce determination. "You have the power to break this cycle, not just for you, but for your baby. You don't owe your love to anyone who doesn't recognize its worth." Tears filled my eyes as her words sank in, slowly healing something inside me. My hand instinctively rested on my stomach, a protective gesture filled with promise. "You're right," I whispered softly, voice gaining strength with each word. "I won't let my child grow up believing they have to beg for love. I won't let them become who I've been, someone convinced that they're only valuable when they sacrifice themselves." Barbara gently took my hand, squeezing reassuringly. "Then this is your moment. It might feel like everything's falling apart, but maybe it's actually falling into place." As dawn approached, flooding the room with soft, golden light, I took a deep breath and let go. Of Justin, of my family's expectations, of my old self. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Yet for the first time, I felt ready. Not because it would be painless, but because for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. In the days following my birthday, reality settled around me like a heavy fog, cold, persistent, and impossible to ignore. My phone buzzed constantly, flooded with messages from friends offering pity and confusion, from mutual acquaintances fishing for juicy gossip, and occasionally from Brian, whose sporadic apologies felt more like attempts to ease his conscience than genuine remorse. But I didn't respond. For the first time, I prioritized my own emotional peace over his need for closure. Yet despite my newfound clarity, practical challenges loomed larger than ever. Rent was due soon, and my job as a freelance editor didn't exactly provide financial stability. Anxiety crept in quietly, keeping me awake at night, whispering fears of inadequacy and failure. Each morning became a battle to push through exhaustion, nausea, and uncertainty. One particularly difficult afternoon, sitting alone at my kitchen table, a pile of unpaid bills mocking me, I felt completely overwhelmed. My mind spun, desperately trying to find solutions. Instinctively, my hand rested on my still flat stomach, anchoring me back to reality. I was responsible now for another life, and that meant I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not completely. Determined, I reached out to Hannah, confiding my worries. Within hours, she arrived at my doorstep, armed with practical advice, a budgeting spreadsheet, and gentle encouragement. We sat together at the kitchen table, listing expenses, planning meals, discussing side jobs I could manage even during the hardest days of my pregnancy. "Maybe it's time you finally shared your story," Hannah suggested softly, glancing at me across the table. "You've always wanted to write. Why not now?" I hesitated. Writing had always been my private escape, my quiet rebellion against a world that constantly made me feel unseen. But the thought of exposing my vulnerabilities publicly terrified me. "Who would even care, Hannah?" I asked quietly, doubt coloring my voice. "My story isn't special." She smiled knowingly, eyes gentle but firm. "It's special because it's real, because so many women feel exactly like you do, trapped, unseen, undervalued. Your voice could be the one thing someone else needs to hear right now." Her words stayed with me, planting seeds of quiet courage. Later that evening, alone in the gentle quietness of my room, I opened my laptop. My heart raced as I typed my first few words, hesitantly, vulnerably, honestly. "My name is Lily, and on my birthday, the man I loved most handed me a note calling me useless." I wrote late into the night, pouring out truths I'd hidden even from myself. Tears blurred my vision at times, but I kept writing, feeling lighter with each confession, stronger with each sentence. When I finally clicked publish, I felt exposed, yet strangely liberated. The next morning, to my astonishment, comments poured in, messages of understanding, solidarity, encouragement. People thanked me for voicing feelings they'd long suppressed, offering support and even sharing their own stories of healing. My inbox filled with heartfelt messages from strangers who, like me, had unknowingly sacrificed themselves for conditional love. That simple act of vulnerability showed me something powerful. I wasn't alone. And perhaps more importantly, my pain had purpose. Through honesty, I had opened doors for conversations others desperately needed. Slowly, my anxiety eased. Financial struggles remained, of course, but now I faced them differently. No longer isolated, but supported by an invisible web of empathy. With every story I wrote, my sense of self-worth grew stronger, steadying my steps forward. Soon the fog around me began to lift, replaced by quiet resilience. I wasn't simply surviving anymore, I was rebuilding, rediscovering a strength I'd forgotten I had. This new journey was just beginning, but for the first time I felt genuinely ready for what lay ahead. 2 months had passed since the night Brian walked out, leaving me standing humiliated in front of everyone we knew. My pregnancy was no longer just a secret bump hidden beneath loose sweaters. It was now an undeniable reality, a visible reminder of both pain and hope. One evening, as I carefully folded baby clothes gifted by Hannah, a loud, erratic knocking startled me from my thoughts. Glancing anxiously through the peephole, my heart sank. Brian stood on the other side, swaying slightly, clearly intoxicated. My first instinct was to stay silent, to pretend I wasn't home. But then he spoke, his voice cracking, raw and vulnerable. "Lily, please, I just need to talk." Reluctantly, I cracked the door open, refusing to fully invite him in. The man standing before me was unrecognizable from the confident, charming person I once knew. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled, and he reeked of alcohol. "What do you want, Brian?" I asked cautiously, my voice steady yet distant. He hesitated, swaying slightly as he struggled for words. Finally, his voice broke into a shaky whisper. Maria left me. She found out about everything. I lost my job, Lily. I've lost everything. For a brief moment, old instincts surged within me. The instinct to comfort, to fix, to forgive. But then the memories returned sharply. The humiliation, the careless cruelty of his words, the indifferent laughter of friends. I'm sorry for how I ended things, he slurred, reaching clumsily toward me. I made a mistake. Which mistake exactly? I interrupted sharply. Cheating on me, humiliating me publicly, or leaving me alone and pregnant? He stared at me, mouth slightly agape, speechless at my bluntness. Finally, he whispered weakly, all of it. Silence stretched painfully between us. I felt compassion stirring within me, not because I believed his apology, but because I saw clearly for the first time just how broken Brian truly was. But empathy didn't mean sacrificing myself again. I had learned the cost of that mistake. I accept your apology, Brian, I said quietly but firmly. But I don't trust it. Your actions have consequences, and the consequence is that you've lost the right to be part of my life. We can discuss co-parenting when you're sober, but tonight isn't the time. Anger briefly flashed in his eyes, replaced quickly by desperation. I don't have anywhere else to go, he pleaded, voice shaking. That's not my responsibility anymore, I replied, a deep sadness mingling with newfound strength. You made your choice clear. Now I'm making mine. Closing the door gently but firmly, I stood quietly in the dimly lit hallway, heart racing yet resolute. I could hear Brian's footsteps retreating, uneven and defeated. It was painful, yes, but necessary. That night, as I lay in bed, hand gently resting on my growing belly, I realized this moment marked a turning point in my life. For once, I'd prioritized my dignity over someone else's comfort, chosen self-respect over fear of loneliness, and though uncertainty lingered, I felt undeniably stronger, anchored by a newfound clarity. Love didn't mean sacrificing oneself endlessly. True strength came from knowing exactly when to walk away. Several weeks later, as I stood in the grocery store aisle examining prenatal vitamins, a familiar voice called my name softly from behind. Turning, I came face to face with Maria, the woman Brian had chosen over me. Her eyes darted nervously, her expression a mixture of guilt and hesitation. Lily, she began softly, avoiding direct eye contact. Can we talk? My heart quickened, old wounds resurfacing sharply. Still, I forced myself to remain calm. About what? Maria swallowed hard, then spoke cautiously. About Brian, and about everything that happened. I hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at my stomach. Yet something urged me forward, a quiet curiosity mixed with the need for closure. We sat down at a nearby coffee shop, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. Maria fidgeted, twisting her napkin tightly in her hands. I'm sorry, Lily, she finally admitted quietly, sincerity evident in her voice. Brian told me you two were practically separated already, that he was trapped in an unhappy relationship. I believed him, but now I see how blind I was. Her words pierced through me, not because they hurt, but because they revealed clearly the manipulative, insecure nature Brian had carefully hidden beneath his charm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. Maria, I asked gently, why are you telling me this now? She sighed heavily, eyes glistening with tears. Because I realized too late that Brian's problems weren't about you or me. He's deeply insecure, Lily, always chasing validation from others. When things didn't turn out as perfectly as he wanted, he blamed everyone else, including us. Her words hung heavily between us, painting a painful yet clear picture. I saw Brian's cruel birthday note again in my mind, not as a personal attack, but as a desperate attempt to project his own inadequacies onto me. Honestly, Lily, Maria continued gently, the breakup devastated me too, but it woke me up. It made me question why I let someone else's approval define my worth. Her words struck deeply, mirroring my own recent realizations. Suddenly, I felt an unexpected kinship with this woman, whom I'd once viewed only through a lens of betrayal and resentment. I spent years of my life believing love had to be earned, Maria, I confessed quietly, looking down at my cup. Brian wasn't the only one I tried to impress. My parents taught me from childhood that love was conditional, something to earn by constantly pleasing others, even at my own expense. Maria nodded, understanding evident in her expression. Same here. I guess that's why we both tolerated Brian longer than we should have. As silence stretched gently between us, something inside me began to shift. I saw clearly that my pain wasn't isolated. It was shared by others who, like me, had learned from an early age to diminish themselves for love and acceptance. Before leaving, Maria looked at me sincerely. I genuinely hope you find happiness, Lily. Real happiness, the kind that starts from within. I smiled softly, feeling warmth spreading gently through my chest. I wish the same for you, Maria. Walking home that evening, I felt strangely lighter. The encounter hadn't erased the pain, but it clarified something crucial. Brian's betrayal wasn't about my inadequacies, but rather about his deep-seated insecurities. I wasn't responsible for his choices, nor was I responsible for fixing him. With that newfound understanding, I let go of resentment, of blame, of the need to measure my worth by another person's love. For the first time, I genuinely embraced the idea that I was enough, exactly as I was. I understood now that love, in its truest form, should never require us to sacrifice ourselves. Real love sees, accepts, and empowers. And above all, real love begins from within. Life settled into a fragile rhythm. I juggled between medical appointments, therapy sessions, and my newfound passion, sharing my healing journey online. Every day I felt more anchored, slowly building the life I once thought impossible without Brian. Then one evening, a frantic knocking startled me. Opening the door cautiously, I saw Brian, disheveled, exhausted, desperation etched deeply into his face. "Lily, I'm in trouble," he blurted out, voice shaking. "I lost everything. They're evicting me. I have nowhere to go. Please help me." His vulnerability tugged fiercely at my heartstrings. Yet this time, compassion came tempered with a newfound clarity. I hesitated, vividly recalling how quickly Brian had discarded me in my most vulnerable moment. This moment of desperation felt familiar. Another test of my resolve. Another opportunity to repeat past mistakes. "Brian," I began softly, voice steady yet firm, "you've put yourself here." His eyes widened, confusion mixing with frustration. "Lily, please, just this once, I'm begging you. You're the only one who—" "Who what?" I gently interrupted. "Who's always there when things get hard? Who cleans up your messes every single time? Brian, that's the problem. I was always your safety net, never your partner." He stepped back, eyes wide as if genuinely seeing me for the first time. "It's different now," he whispered, desperate. "I've learned my lesson. I just need another chance." A heavy silence stretched between us. Deep inside, old instincts battled fiercely, urging me to give in, to offer support once more. But alongside those instincts rose the quiet voice I'd painstakingly nurtured through months of healing, reminding me clearly that love without boundaries wasn't love, it was exploitation. "You may think you're sincere right now, Brian," I said softly, my voice calm yet unyielding. "But you haven't changed. You're not here because you're sorry. You're here because you've exhausted every other option. But I won't be your fallback plan anymore." His expression shifted from pleading to disbelief, anger sparking briefly in his eyes. "So you're just abandoning me?" "No," I replied firmly. "I'm simply choosing myself and my child this time. You need to find your own way, just like I've found mine." He stared silently, shoulders slumping, defeat washing over his features. "I didn't think you'd actually say no," he whispered finally. "I know," I responded, a quiet sadness coloring my voice. "Because I never have, but I've learned the hard way that unconditional love shouldn't mean unconditional sacrifice." With one last resigned glance, Brian turned away, walking slowly down the hallway and disappearing into the night. As I closed the door gently behind him, my heart pounded heavily, but for the first time I felt genuinely liberated. The decision wasn't easy, drawing clear boundaries rarely is, but it was necessary. It was an act of genuine kindness, not just toward myself, but also toward Brian. Allowing him to face the consequences of his actions was the only way he might ever truly grow. Later that night, alone in the quiet of my apartment, I placed a hand gently over my growing belly, feeling a surge of quiet pride. This moment wasn't just about refusing Brian's demands, it was proof of how far I'd come. Oh, I finally understood clearly that strength wasn't measured by how much pain you could silently endure. Real strength lay in the courage to set boundaries, to say enough, and to honor the worth I'd fought so desperately to reclaim. When my due date approached, I felt an unfamiliar calmness settle into my life. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but rather a quiet acceptance born from months of fighting my inner battles and finally understanding my own worth. The nursery, painted in gentle shades of sage and cream, had become my sanctuary. Each small addition, the crib Hannah and I assembled with laughter and frustration, the pastel-colored blankets stacked neatly in the corner, symbolized the new life waiting to unfold. Yet even as I prepared for motherhood, my thoughts often drifted to Brian, not in longing or anger, but with a strange, detached curiosity about whether he had truly changed. One afternoon, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, breaking my quiet reflections. When I opened the door, there stood Brian, clean-shaven, composed, holding a neatly wrapped gift in his hands. "Can I come in for just a minute?" he asked softly, his voice hesitant but respectful. Cautiously, I stepped aside. Brian entered, looking around at my transformed apartment, the subtle surprise evident in his eyes. He handed me the gift carefully, his fingers brushing mine for only a moment before pulling back respectfully. "It's for you," he said gently. "And for our daughter." I slowly opened the package, revealing a beautifully bound journal. On the first page, in Brian's neat handwriting, were words that struck deep into my heart. "You were never useless. It was my own fear of inadequacy that blinded me. I hope one day you can forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours." Silence filled the room. For the first time since everything had unraveled between us, Brian's apology felt sincere, carrying genuine vulnerability. Yet even now, forgiveness wasn't something easily given. I raised my eyes to meet his, feeling calm yet firm. "Thank you," I whispered softly. "But understand something clearly. This doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't fix everything overnight." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening with quiet acceptance. "I know, but I want to be part of her life, Lily. Not as your partner, I understand that door's closed, but as someone who genuinely cares." I studied him for a long moment, measuring the sincerity in his words. "Then we do this my way," I replied decisively. "We co-parent with clear boundaries. No emotional games, no manipulation, no crossing lines." "Agreed," Brian answered without hesitation. The genuine humility in his voice surprised me, revealing a side of him I'd rarely seen. Vulnerable, sincere, and perhaps finally growing up. After he left, I sat quietly, holding the journal gently in my hands. Flipping through its blank pages, I felt the weight of possibility, a tangible representation of both the pain of the past and the promise of an unwritten future. I placed one hand over my belly, sensing the steady movements of the life growing within me. In that quiet moment, I understood more clearly than ever. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing Brian's past actions. It was about freeing myself from their grip. By setting clear boundaries, I wasn't just protecting myself, I was reclaiming my power, my voice, and my dignity. And most importantly, I was building a foundation of strength and respect for the little girl who soon would look up to me for guidance. For the first time, I felt ready, not because I had all the answers, but because I had finally learned that my strength lay not in enduring pain silently, but in openly and courageously standing up for what I deserved. The day my daughter arrived, the world shifted again, this time into a clarity I'd never known. When the nurses placed her gently onto my chest, tears of joy mingled with the exhaustion from hours of labor. Her tiny, warm body felt impossibly fragile, yet filled me with an overwhelming strength. In that quiet, powerful moment, I knew life would never be the same. Not easier, perhaps not even simpler, but infinitely richer, deeper, and undeniably real. Brian was there, standing quietly by the window. He didn't hover anxiously, nor did he take center stage. Instead, he watched respectfully from a distance, awaiting my invitation to step closer. Eventually, I nodded gently toward him. He approached slowly, hesitant but tender, eyes fixed with awe on the small bundle in my arms. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice breaking softly with genuine emotion. For the first time, I saw Brian as he truly was, not as the charming facade he'd carefully constructed, but as a man humbled by his mistakes, cautiously stepping into the unfamiliar terrain of genuine responsibility. In the weeks following the birth, Brian respected the boundaries we'd established. He showed up punctually for scheduled visits, respected the limits I'd clearly set, and even asked thoughtful questions about parenting. Our interactions weren't perfect, occasionally tinged with awkwardness or tension, but they were honest, respectful, and functional. For me, that was enough. Life slowly fell into a new rhythm, challenging yet fulfilling. Hannah became a frequent visitor, bringing coffee, laughter, and a reassuring presence into my days. One afternoon, as we sat together in my living room, watching my daughter sleep peacefully, Hannah turned to me with quiet pride in her eyes. "You've come so far," she remarked gently. "Do you realize how different you are now?" I glanced down at my daughter, feeling a fierce tenderness swell within me. It took losing everything to finally see myself clearly. I didn't change overnight. I fought for every step. But yes, I'm different, stronger. Hannah smiled warmly, squeezing my hand. "I'm proud of you." Weeks later, during a peaceful afternoon walk in the park, pushing the stroller gently beneath sun-dappled trees, my phone vibrated quietly. It was Eli, the delivery guy who'd become a surprising, comforting presence in my life since everything fell apart. Our friendship was simple, genuine, undemanding. His gentle jokes, thoughtful gestures, and patient understanding had begun healing parts of me I hadn't realized were still wounded. Today, Eli's message was simple. "Coffee tomorrow? Thought you might enjoy adult conversation that doesn't involve diapers." I laughed softly, warmth spreading through my chest. Eli respected my pace, never pushing for more than I could comfortably offer. He understood boundaries instinctively, respecting them effortlessly, a stark contrast to everything I'd known before. Yet even as hope fluttered gently inside me, I didn't rush into this new relationship. I was cautious, patient, realistic. Life had taught me that healing took time, love needed patience, and trust must be built slowly. That night, rocking my daughter gently to sleep, I whispered softly to her, promising lessons I'd learned through pain and courage. "You'll never have to earn love, sweet girl. Your worth will never depend on someone's approval. And no matter how messy life gets, you'll always have the power to choose your own path." Outside the window, stars twinkled gently in the night sky, reminding me that beauty often emerges from darkness, strength from scars, and clarity from chaos. I didn't know exactly what the future would bring. Perhaps Eli would become someone important, perhaps Brian and I would find harmony in co-parenting, or perhaps entirely new challenges lay ahead. Yet one truth remained clear. I no longer feared uncertainty. Instead, I embraced it. Life wasn't about crafting perfect endings. It was about building the strength and resilience to handle whatever came next. Holding my daughter close, I felt at peace. Not because my story had ended perfectly, but because I'd found the courage to keep writing it, one brave choice at a time.